Hello, welcome, and long time no see. This is Terrified Thursdays, a weekly Halloween review show leading up to the 31st, and boy howdy, are we mixing things up this year. We've covered a lot of horror games, underrated films, and creations in the public domain, but I think it's best we give a nod to some of those gems in other artistic mediums, specifically ones that I grew up with, and can hopefully lend a few of my own 2 cents. Horror books for kids and tweens in the aughts were the rave. You couldn't avoid a Scholastic book fair without these names showing up. When I was 8, I was an avid reader of Goosebumps, Shivers, and later took a nosedive into the works of Stephen King, H.P. Lovecraft, and Anne Rice, believe it or not. All of the librarians were worried about my mental health in middle school, but I don't think they had anything to fear. I'd even like to mention that I got into the start of those Skeleton Creek books back in 2009 through my siblings, which incorporated found footage with every chapter and elevated the storytelling in a very interactive way. Life was just so simple back then. But I'm here to briefly talk to you today about Skeleton Man by author Joseph Bruchac. I was never terrified by this book, but it deems a lot of reflecting on this Halloween season. This was a book my parents got for me at a young age, a book that always stuck with me in many ways, and a book I've always wanted to adapt for the screen. In fact, I actually have a screenplay floating around from the COVID lockdowns that needs a revisit. I'll get around to that at some point. Anywho, it's part folktale retelling, part ghost story, and part mystery for a younger crowd. Our main character Molly wakes up in her home with no parents to be seen. We learn that her father grew up on the Mohawk Reserve of, I'm gonna butcher this word, Akwesasne, where he learned the best scary stories. One of her favorites was The Legend of Skeleton Man, a gruesome tale about a man with a deadly, insatiable hunger. But ever since her parents mysteriously vanished, these spooky tales have started to feel all too real. And things go from bad to worse for Molly when a stranger shows up one day and claims to be her great uncle. A ghostly, thin man she's never seen before. A man who reminds her an awful lot of the Skeleton Man. But he couldn't possibly be the same person from her father's tale. Or could he? It's up to Molly to uncover the truth about this fearsome figure and rescue her parents before it's too late. The great uncle, as he is quoted, shows up to claim her with photographs of her family that convince the adults around her, but not Molly, that he is a relative. In fact, the photos look suspiciously like the photos that belong to her father. Each night, the bony guardian locks her into her room, allowing her to attend school during the day, and Molly relies on the deciphering of her dreams, her, warrior girl courage, and the support of her quirky but compassionate teacher to solve the mystery and rescue her parents. This eerie figure of the semi-human creature pretending to be Molly's uncle, I should mention, is particularly well drawn. I quote, "His fingers spread out so wide that they look like the talons of a giant bird. His eyes are twin blue flames burning from within his skull." The mix of traditional and contemporary cultural references adds to the story's haunting appeal and the quick pace and suspense, while never veering too off from the fantastical, and that should certainly be noted. This whole story is based on the legend of the lazy uncle who accidentally burns himself while his family is scavenging for food. He eats his finger in the meantime, thinks that he tastes good, then devours himself before becoming the Skeleton Man, and then goes on a munching spree through the rest of his family and tribe. Bruchac does a really good job of creating a spooky atmosphere subtly. There are bars on Molly's window. Her uncle locks her in her room every night. She eventually discovers that there are hidden cameras watching her. She is pretty sure the food is drugged. that she's given. The one time she does tell the social worker that he locks her in at night, the uncle hides the evidence, making her look like a liar, basically gaslighting her. The only person who believes her is her teacher, but there's very little she can do to actually help, especially after the lock incident. Bruchac also does an amazing job retelling the story with Molly while connecting her more closely to the story through her Mohawk heritage. Molly has always had lucid dreams, is able to rely on them to help her outwit Skeleton Man and rescue herself and her parents. The dream elements of the story never feel contrived, and at the time didn't pull me out of the story the way a lot of magical realism can. Even at a young age though, I'd say the addition of the rabbit advising and helping Molly to escape the Skeleton Man's clutches was a bit much, whether it's true to the legend or not, but it wasn't doing it for me. There was a sequel years later in 2006 called Return of Skeleton Man, which I didn't think was bad by any means, but didn't have the lasting effect of the original. It's essentially Molly and her folks on vacation, and her lazy Uncle Skeleton Man pursuing and stalking them. He never died, he just came back.
Because as they were approaching, their uncle said, "Children, come here! I found something good to eat, but it's gone now and I need you." And then they heard a sound. It was the dry bones of their uncle rubbing together as he moved around just a little bit, shifting from side to side.
I mean, hey, it's a good book for 10-year-olds, maybe something to even read to your kids or younger siblings. Just don't get it mixed up with the movie from 2004 with Michael Rooker and Casper Van Dien. I suppose I should mention, or should bring up, Joseph Bruchac's odd heritage, since at the age of 81 currently, there's been a ton of speculation if he's even got any American Indian in him. The Abenaki tribe denies this at every turn. They don't think he's got any legitimate Native American blood, since he was a guy that clearly came from a lot of European descent, but I don't really give a shit. At the end of the day, he's a good storyteller. He's well versed in the stories his grandfather told him when he was young. And you know what? I just gotta say cheers to the guy before he becomes a skeleton man himself. Anyways, have a good night, and I'll see you at the next Terrified Thursdays.